All right. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Gospel Truth. I'm your host, Marla Wilson, and we have another exciting debate for you today. And we're going to be discussing, having a conversation of abortion. I'm trying to remember the premise. I got to look at the notes again to remember the premise. But nonetheless, we're going to be having a conversation about abortion. And I have two guests with me. I have Mr. Tim Tant, and Sydney. And these two have some history with each other. They know they've spoken on against a couple of subject matters conversations already, and so they are familiar with each other and the way that they converse. And so this should be a fun one. I think this is going to be a very fruitful one, and I think it's going to be fun. And so hopefully you guys are ready to have a fun-filled debate concerning abortion. But before I bring these guys, both of them in, I do want to make sure you guys know to subscribe to The Gospel Truth. Hit that notification bell as well, so you don't miss all the shows that are coming up here in the future on The Gospel Truth. If you don't know, The Gospel Truth is not only on YouTube, but also on Twitter, also on Instagram, also on TikTok as well. So make sure and Facebook. So make sure you flow over there to those respective platforms and subscribe or follow on those platforms as well. If you don't know, The Gospel Truth is also on podcast, so Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. So go ahead and check that out as well, and click in and get glued in what the Gospel Truth has going on. All right. If you guys don't know, the Gospel Truth is put on a conference. TGT Debate Conference 2026 is going to be February 6th and 7th. And so it should be a fun debate, man. I got some heavy hitters joining that's going to be jumping in on debates live, in-person debates. Dr. James White, Dr. Dustin Smith. I got Eli Ayala versus Dan Barker. I got Jeremiah Nortier versus Dr. Leighton Flowers. So that's just some of many. Matt Sligg against Nadir Ahmed. And so that should be a fun one, obviously. And so hopefully everyone is out there is excited for the conference coming up here soon on The Gospel Truth, and I'm looking forward to it, right? I'm looking forward to it. So I hope that you will consider purchasing tickets. If you're interested in buying tickets for this event, you can go to the Facebook page, you can go to Instagram, you can go to TikTok. Well, I don't think it's on TikTok, but you can go to the YouTube channel where I do all my posts and everything. And there's a link there, and Twitter X as well. There's a link there where you can click on that link and it'll take you to the event page to purchase tickets for the event. So hopefully you guys will consider going and hit that and buy a ticket. And so that said, let me bring my guest in so they can introduce themselves to you guys and have we're gonna have a fun debate. So let me bring in Sydney and Mr. Tim Tant. How y'all doing? How's everything going?
Not bad. Thanks for having me. Yeah,
I'm glad both of you have joined, and I'm so excited to have you guys. And Tim reached out to me and said that I know I have a debate that I want to do. And I'm like, okay, what you got, man? Concerning abortion. I was like, oh, okay. This is a hot and heavy topic. So I'm excited and to host this debate. So before we jump into it, I do want to allow you guys to introduce yourselves to the audience. Tell them what you do, podcast, YouTube, whatever you're at that you want people to check you out. This is your opportunity to show them or tell them where you're at. And so start with Sydney. You mind giving a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sydney. I'm the host of a podcast called Growing Up Fundy, where I interview people on their religious background, whether they grew up religious, became religious, are non-religious, historians, psychologists, anything that's adjacent to religion. I'm a non-religious person, so I like interviewing others who grew up in ways that I'm unfamiliar with. I'm also a professional debater. I coach people how to debate, and I engage in debates similar to this. And Tim and I have had some live discussions on stage before in the past as well. So one of my passions is just really teaching people how to have communicative debates and stream from what we know to be debate, the argumentative up on each other versus having actual discussions where you can teach each other things and learn from one another and kind of analyze each other's beliefs and things like that. So you can find me on Sydney Davis Jr. on all platforms, whether that's YouTube, Instagram. I'm on Spotify as Growing Up Fundy. Pretty much any platform you can either find me under my name or Growing Up Fundy, the brand of my podcast.
All right, Tim, this is your chance. Go ahead, buddy.
Hey, Marlon. So my name is Tim Tant, and based in the Nashville area, one of the co-founders of the Tennessee Fellowship for Christian Apologetics, or just Tennessee Apologetics for short. We do apologetic fellowship nights we try to shoot for once a quarter. Sometimes we don't hit that frequency. We also put on a conference this past year. We're shooting for another one again in the fall, based here in Nashville. So I've got a passion for apologetics and a passion for evangelism. So I do go out and do some street evangelism, engage people in one-on-ones and things like that here in downtown Nashville. Like Cindy mentioned, we do know each other personally. So we have done something similar, not quite as formal of structure before, but we've shared the stage before in conversations about our worldviews and things like that. So I'm looking forward to doing it again.
All right. I'm looking forward to as well seeing you guys engage for the first time. So this should be a fun one, guys. And I'm sorry, I messed up the premise. The premise is actually, should abortion be illegal? And so we're going to have a lot of fun once again. So audience, I hope you guys got your pen, pad, take notes, do whatever you have to do to stay engaged with this conversation. And, get your questions in early because I expect this to be a very, very engaging conversation, moving conversation as well. So with that said, once the conversation or this debate is, should abortion be illegal? Tim, you're taking the affirmative. Sid, you're arguing the negative. We're going to start that with 15-minute opening statements from Tim, and then we're going to go to a 20-minute cross-section. We follow up with a 15-minute opening from Sydney, a 20-minute cross-section from Tim. And then we're going to go into, what was it again? I lost
rebuttals.
5-minute
Yeah,
rebuttals.
we're going to minute. 2 5-minute rounds, and then we're going to go to 10-minute closings for both. And then we're going to have a 20-30-minute Q&A from the audience at the end of all of that. So once again, audience, get your questions in early, and we'll save them, and then we'll get those questions in during the Q&A. So with that said, Tim, I will start your timer. So Sydney, I'm going to take you off stage, and then we're going to get...
Perfect.
Am I going to be able to see the timer, or should I use my?
You can. I'll be timing it with my, because I don't have my whole setup, which is another point of irritation for me. So I'll be timing you, and
I won't be able to see your timer, right? So
yeah, you won't be able to see my timer on the screen. In a warning, I just chime in and say 1 minute. I'll let you know when your time is getting ready to expire. All right. So with that said, I'm going to start your timer as soon as you begin to speak.
In the 7th grade, I had an opportunity to participate in an activity called Youth Legislature. We formed into teams and had the chance to produce and debate mock legislation in the Tennessee State Capitol, which I thought was an amazing experience. Truthfully, though, I don't recall too many details about that day, aside from all of the architecture and the bullet hole and the railing and some of the stairs that came from a dispute between lawmakers many years ago, and the fact that our pretend bill that our team put forward was a bill to abolish abortion. Over the past several years, through multiple changes of presidential administrations, George Floyd, the BLM riots, COVID, like many of us, I've been forced to reconsider the role of our government and what its most basic functions are, or really what they should be. In the Declaration of Independence, which certainly wasn't a governing document, but rather an expression of our baseline principles, our founding fathers expressed an unalienable right to life, a right that I wholeheartedly affirm. Every human being has a fundamental right to life. To coincide with that right, and the main thesis of my argument tonight is this: every human being deserves equal protection under the law. Before we proceed further, I want to spend a moment in defining a key term. If I'm advocating for abortion to be illegal, then I should probably give some attention to what I mean by that term. The term abortion has 2 unique definitions: medical and legal. Medically speaking, abortion is the termination of a pregnancy, or just the expulsion of a human fetus. This definition is not in view regarding my proposition tonight. Rather, our concern is the legal definition. Legally speaking, abortion has been defined as, quote, the act of using or prescribing an instrument, a drug, a medicine, or any other substance, device, or means with the intent to cause the death of an unborn child. If every human being has a right to life, and every human being deserves equal protection under the law, this certainly begs the question, when does life begin? Fortunately, science is on our side. Embryology textbooks universally agree that human life begins at fertilization. There is no path to refute this biological reality. If my opponent chooses to disregard the science, she'll be forced to attempt to separate personhood from being human, which hasn't played out well in human history, or she'll have to prescribe some arbitrary standards such as location, inside versus outside of the womb, consciousness, physical size, or some other metric that's void of any scientific grounding at all. We even have laws in the books today that recognize the reality of human life in the womb. Every jurisdiction within the United States criminalizes the killing of preborn children in utero when the mother is harmed by another person. A drunk driver who kills a pregnant mother will be charged with 2 homicides. We rightly punish drunk drivers who cause a miscarriage. We should not permit anyone to cause the same type of harm upon request. So the foundational argument goes like this. Number 1, it is always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Number 2, abortion is the intentional killing of an innocent human being prior to birth. Therefore, abortion is always wrong and should be illegal. At the very foundational level, it is essential that our government provide the same basic legal protections afforded today to the majority of human beings to all human beings. I'll repeat and rephrase that. All human beings deserve equal protections under the law. Can my opponent affirm this? And what actually happens in an abortion? As we've already established, life begins at conception. Things like sex, ethnicity, hair color, eye color, countless other traits are determined at this point. By 22 days, the heartbeat can be detected. At 28 days, buds of arms and legs are appearing, and spontaneous and reflexive movements can begin just weeks after fertilization. Thumb sucking begins at 9 weeks. The fetus swallows, grasps, sighs, and stretches. At 29 weeks, with lots of help, it's possible for the babies to survive outside of the womb. During the first trimester, a mother can kill her own baby with an abortion pill, mifepristone. This pill starves the baby of essential nutrients, killing it in the womb. It is actually possible to reverse the effects at this stage if progesterone is administered as soon as possible. But if it's not, another pill, misoprostol, is taken that causes the uterus to contract to force the dead embryo out. Also, during the first trimester, the abortionist may elect to use a suction catheter that breaks the baby apart and removes the fetus from the womb via a vacuum-like tube. In the second trimester, dilation and evacuation will be necessary. The cervix is dilated, and the abortionist uses various instruments to dismember and extract the baby limb by limb. The baby's body is then reassembled on the table to ensure that no tissue is left behind in the womb. If there's any doubt how horrific this is, you can find these documented images online. Finally, in the third trimester, an induction abortion is necessary. The baby can survive outside of the womb at this point, and the abortionist usually kills the baby first in the womb by injecting a substance to cause cardiac arrest, and then induces stillborn delivery. Abortion isn't healthcare. Abortion is violence. But even if science confirms that the life in the womb is human from conception, and that we already have laws in the book that protect this life in some form, how big of a problem is abortion really? 7 years ago, the rate of abortion in the United Kingdom was around 25%. 1 out of every 4 preborn children were being intentionally killed. Staggering new data was released by the UK just this week. The rate of abortion is now approaching 50%. 48 out of 100 preborn humans are intentionally killed before ever having a chance to live outside the womb. These numbers are staggering. Iceland's population has achieved a record low rate regarding humans with trisomy 21, more commonly known as Down syndrome. That is a rate 4 times less than that of the United States. If you search for information on how Iceland achieved this genetic success, you'll see that advancements in prenatal testing are often credited. But the truth is much more grim. Along with advancements in prenatal testing, mothers and fathers in Iceland are electing to kill their preborn children when diagnosed with Down syndrome. This fits the very definition of eugenics. I think Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, would approve. After all, she writes in her 1921 article titled "The Eugenic Value of Birth Control Propaganda" that, quote, "The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the overfertility of the mentally and physically defective," end quote. I think Sanger would admire Iceland's achievement. Would my opponent as well? Shifting past foreign nations or distant histories for a moment, how serious is this problem today and in our nation? As you might have been able to guess by what I've mentioned about our friends in Europe, abortion numbers in the United States are increasing. According to the Guttmacher Institute, a pro-abortion research and policy organization, we've seen a 13% increase in abortions from 2020 to 2024. We now end the lives of nearly 3,000 preborn babies every day in the United States alone. The estimate is that nearly 65 million human beings have been killed by abortion between 1973 to 2025. Let's look at these staggering numbers a different way. It's hard to get an exact number of abortions each year, but according to a cross-reference of abortion data from the Guttmacher Institute, the CDC, and the Kaiser Family Foundation, we can get pretty close numbers from 1999 onwards. Gen Z lost over 16 million people. Gen Alpha has lost upwards of 12 million. When these numbers are compared with total numbers of birth, 21% of Gen Z and 18% of Gen Alpha have been killed by abortion. But let's pause for a moment and say, well, maybe the 65 million deaths in the last 50 years were medically necessary. Maybe it's really a tragedy that couldn't be avoided. However, the data tells us a very different story. An eight-state study in 2022 by the Charlotte Lozier Institute revealed that upwards of 95% of abortions are considered elective. A 2024 report by the state of Florida revealed that 73% of abortions were elective and 22% were for social or economic reasons. Even a 2004 study by the Guttmacher Institute, again a pro-abortion organization, revealed that only 7% of post-abortive mothers named a health issue as their most important reason for seeking an abortion. The data overwhelmingly demonstrates that the vast majority of abortions done in the United States are not done out of medical necessity. Not only are the vast amount of abortions done for elective reasons, the medical community is becoming even more vocal and outspoken regarding the fact that induced abortions are not medically necessary at all. Dr. Kendra Kolb, a neonatologist who routinely works with mothers experiencing high-risk pregnancies, states that, quote, that mothers deserve to know that even in the most high-risk pregnancies, there is no medical reason why the life of the child must be directly and intentionally ended through an abortion procedure, end quote. Now, there are circumstances when the baby must be delivered through what is called a preterm delivery, but this is not an abortion. These circumstances are tragic and they stem from high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. These babies and mothers deserve to be treated with respect and compassion and to be told the truth about what their options are. The movement is obviously bigger than just Dr. Kolb. Last year, the statement on abortion by 170 obstetricians and gynecologists was produced, which describes how intentionally killing the preborn human being is not necessary in order to provide the best evidence-based care for mothers. So let's recap a few things that we've covered so far. First, it's a central function of our government to provide basic protections for human life. Second, science demonstrates that human life begins at fertilization. It's a unique human being with completely unique DNA. Next, abortions are not necessary in order to provide evidence-based care. And lastly, the overwhelming majority of abortions are done not out of any reported medical necessity, but for purely elective reasons. Now, there are a few objections my opponent may raise, as others do, and as you'll see, all of them are either arbitrary, inconsistent, or even both. We'll spend more time in the coming rebuttals addressing those in more detail, but I wanted to prepare you on some of those objections now. Bodily autonomy is often cited in protest against abolishing abortion, and yes, bodily autonomy is extremely important. However, your bodily autonomy does not give you the right to kill another human being. Humans don't have two hearts, two heads, two brains, etc. Science informs us that the body inside the womb is an entirely unique human being. The location of the baby. Some will argue that abortion is acceptable up until the moment of birth, that once the baby is born, the mother no longer has the right to kill it. But what changes regarding the life of the child the moment before birth and the moment after? Nothing. Essentially, this argument says that if the baby is located in the womb, you can kill it. If it's located outside the womb, you can't. It's an arbitrary and meaningless standard that is not rooted in any science, and location is never a way in which human value should be determined. Others may argue that stages of development can warrant abortion. This is to say that less developed humans are somehow less human than those fully developed. And when you hear language such as zygote, fetus, these are just references to developmental stages, not much different than baby, toddler, teenager, etc. How does this play out in adults and older children? Are children with developmental disorders less human than those without them? Additionally, our humanity is not based upon our level of consciousness. It's not okay to kill people that are sleeping, that are in temporary comas, even unborn babies in the womb. All human beings have a natural capacity for consciousness, and their place in humanity is not based on their memory or level of awareness. Lastly, you might say, well, what about instances of rape? What about instances of incest? And while those are surely tragic situations and rapists should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, we shouldn't then also extend the penalty of death that the rapist deserves to the innocent human being who is now very real and not at all guilty of the crimes of the father. And wouldn't you know that 73% of women who do conceive in rape choose life? 93% of rape victims who aborted said they would not recommend abortion to someone in the same situation. In conclusion, I wholeheartedly affirm that all human beings have inherent worth and value. Now, this is informed by my Christian worldview that teaches us that all human beings are made in the image of God. And as such, we affirm that parents do have an obligation to care for their children. Governments ought to pass laws that protect even the smallest among us. Much of this is already reflected in our laws today. And we would be naive to believe that Sydney's worldview is not also informing her stance on this either. In an atheistic or naturalistic worldview, there is no objective morality, no obligation for parents to care for their children, even if she believes that they should, and no inherent value regarding any human being. And be that as it may, even those with atheistic worldviews and progressive political ideologies, they see the problems with pro-abortion arguments. This is not a uniquely Christian position to hold. Renowned atheist and debater Christopher Hitchens, he was pro-life. He openly affirmed the humanity of newly formed humans in the womb. There are also organizations rising up, such as the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, working to end the atrocity of abortion in our nation. Don't let partisan politics or heartless politicians keep you from affirming the value of all human beings. With all this considered, I look forward to getting into more detail during the cross-examination and hearing from my opponent during her opening. Thank you very much. Marlon, that's it for my opening.
Perfect. So I'm just going to jump into this cross-ex, I think is how we're headed in this direction. So Tim, first of all, thanks for inviting me to come and debate with you today. I know we've spoken in the past. It's always been a really good time. So I appreciate you inviting me to be here. So I know that we're supposed to cross-examine for 20 minutes, but I can already tell the audience and yourself that I'm not going to take the full 20 minutes. I just have a few questions for you based on some of the points that you brought up in your argument. So my first question for you is, I'm going to list some medical procedures, and I just want you to tell me what they all have in common. So let's see, the receipt of anesthesia, a colonoscopy, vision correction for people who are going blind or people who have cataracts, pre-cancer removal, x-rays, receiving an x-ray, and painkillers in general. What do you think all of those have in common?
Oh, they're very different, but it seems like in some way it's inserting something, whether it's a x-ray or something, into a human body.
Okay. So the thing that all of those have in common is that they are, from insurance perspective, considered elective. So just keep that in mind as I move on into my arguments later. I'll repeat myself: anesthesia, colonoscopy, any kind of vision correction for people who have glaucoma or have different vision, permanent vision loss, pre-cancer removal, especially for people who come from a lineage that they know they are going to get breast cancer or colon cancer, things like that. Colonoscopies, we mentioned, x-rays to see what's wrong with you, and the general administration of painkillers. So those are all considered elective. If you don't mind me asking, and I totally understand we're on the internet, you don't have to answer this. How many kids do you have?
I have 3 children.
3 children. Perfect. How many of your children are adopted?
None of them.
None of them. Okay. And do you mind if I ask why you've never adopted a child?
Oh, sure. We're definitely considering it and in conversations about it. And it's very possible that in future years that we will foster or adopt.
Sure. And why would you want to wait for future years as opposed to now?
That's a good question. There's a lot of factors that go into when families adopt.
Yeah.
We would probably foster first, and what we would prefer to do is wait till our children are a little bit older. Because it's always recommended that when you do foster, you foster children that are younger than the kids that you have now. So we wouldn't seek to adopt babies, because there's actually a very long list of families that are waiting to adopt babies. Far more families willing to adopt babies than there are babies available to be adopted.
Perfect. And then do you consider the creation of unique DNA to be life or to be formulation? Do you consider just DNA being formed? We're not talking a heartbeat, there's no brain. Do you consider that to be life, or do you consider that to just be a formation of cells?
It's not DNA alone. As I referenced in my opening statement, embryology textbooks affirm that human life, and so it's not just my position, it's the position of the scientific medical community, that human life is formed at the moment of conception, in which unique DNA is part of what is created.
So what is your definition of life?
It's got a couple of things that involves in life. Uniqueness of DNA, independent of the mother, natural facility to grow and develop. So probably things that include those two things.
Okay. And what is your personal definition of dead or deceased or no longer alive?
When all brain activity, bodily functions cease, there is no more natural capacity for the body to sustain itself.
Perfect. Actually, we agree on that. Those are all my questions.
Awesome.
Yeah. Marlon, I'm ready.
All
when you
right.
are.
Thank you. Yep, I'm in. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, I'm in. Good to go. So, all right. So that's all the questions you have, Sydney?
Yep, that's it.
You got like 15 minutes left.
Yeah. No, that's it.
All right. So, Sydney, you're up with 10-minute opening statement. And so, once again, the same as Tim, I will start your 15-minute timer as soon as you begin to speak. All right.
Perfect. So for anybody watching, first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to address some of the things that my opponent said, and then I'm going to go down my points just to give you an idea of the things I'm going to touch on for my personal point. I'm going to talk about how abortion is actually a very good economic decision, how abortion saves more lives than it prevents. We're going to talk about the statistics on the women who are seeking abortions in the United States. And then we're going to talk about how illegalizing abortion does not stop abortion. And we'll get into more detail there as I get into my arguments. But first, I'd like to address what my opponent said. So my opponent is a very, very good speaker. He's a very, very talented debater, and I totally respect his abilities and his talents. But there's a couple of things that he did here that I want to make sure we call out before we move forward. For example, he mentioned that the definition of life, according to science, is that it begins at conception. And this is actually not true. Yes, human DNA and the formation of a human does begin at conception. I agree with him on that. Science agrees with me on that. But life in itself, and I asked him what his definition of life and death is, if we are talking about, in his own words, the brain function, the heart function, the blood is moving, those are all functions that are not yet available at conception. So it turns out he and I actually agree life does not begin at conception. Human DNA, cells clumping together, those things begin at conception, but that is not life. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I've spoken to a doctor for debate, and he was saying that the definition of being dead is no heartbeat, no brain activity. That is when you cease to be alive. So when we talk about early abortion, which is 93% of abortions, they are early abortions, 9 weeks or fewer. We're not talking about living human beings. We're not talking about killing anything. There is nothing to kill. It was never alive. It was never allowed to reach the state of being alive. So I definitely want to highlight that. While science does say that humans begin forming at conception, life does not begin at conception. And you heard my opponent talk about how life is brain activity, heart activity, things like that. So we agree on that. Life does not actually begin at conception. Something else I noticed in my opponent's arguments are that he does not delve into nuance, and something that I'm going to delve into a lot in my argumentation is nuance. For example, he talks about the number of Gen Z and millennials that have been killed by abortion. What he doesn't talk about is the number of abortions that were performed on fetuses that had no vital signs of life, that never would have survived outside the womb, that were not going to make it to the birth canal in order to be born alive. He doesn't talk about the nuance there with the life of the mother and the health of the mother. So even though there were a significant number of abortions performed in the year, I forget the year that he cited where he got his data, he does not go into detail on how many of those fetuses were actually alive and actually had viability to even make it towards the stage where they develop life. And that makes up a large percentage of abortions. So even though he uses a lot of language, he gives a lot of descriptors, he talks about vacuuming, he talks about parts, he talks about the baby being torn apart and sucked apart by a vacuum. What we are talking about here is, one, we agree life does not begin at conception. Life is heartbeat, is brain activity, is mobility, is those signs of life, right? Versus, which is entirely different. And if we were to agree, then which we did on what life means, then the majority of the abortions that happen in this country happen before signs of life begin. So we are not killing living human beings in the womb. However, by making abortion illegal, we are killing living human beings that currently exist. So I wanted to make sure that I just hit that nail on the head before I move on. Let me get a little overview of also he talks about elective abortions, but I gave him a list of elective procedures that are actually very, very important and oftentimes save lives. For example, you can, if you are a man and you get colon cancer, your colonoscopy to determine whether or not what you have is colon cancer is considered elective. So just because an abortion is filed under an elective abortion, there are so many. I can go down a list. I've got a longer list here of procedures that are considered elective if you ask your insurance company, if you ask your hospital, but if you ask the person who needs that procedure done, it is not elective at all. It's very important. So it's like, yeah, it may be elective to want to see again. It may be elective to want to hear again, but at the end of the day, those are very important things. X-rays considered elective. Even though you need them to be able to tell what is wrong with you, that's considered elective, and it can be left for you to pay out of pocket and considered unnecessary by your insurance company and by your doctor and by your hospital. So we definitely, as much as I don't like to get into the nitty gritty of semantics, that's very important for today's debate because semantics are in fact so much of what this is about. So now I'm going to dive into my arguments. Number one, abortion saves lives. I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds absolutely bananas. We're here talking about killing babies, but that's not what abortion does. Abortion actually saves many lives. According to the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control, the U.S. ranks highest among developed nations for maternal mortality during and indirect within 45 days. So we are the lowest in terms of score. We score the lowest in infant and mother mortality rate during birth because of some of the laws that we have restricting abortion and because some of the laws that are put into place because of abortion restrictions. It does not end with you're not allowed to kill a baby. That's not where it ends, unfortunately. And we'll talk a little bit about how the legislation that gets rid of abortion and makes it illegal actually impacts and kills a lot of people. So we are the worst first world country when it comes to mothers dying. And if you are a pro-life person, that should matter to you a lot. These deaths are caused by hemorrhaging, preeclampsia, eclampsia, cardiomyopathy, infection, and ectopic pregnancies. This is something that's really important to me, and it's really important to lots of women that I know. An ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy that is implanted outside of the uterus. It is an accident. It's an anomaly, but it happens. And here's the thing. It is 100% guaranteed to not be a viable child. You cannot survive in utero if you are an ectopic pregnancy. There is no such thing as detaching it and replanting it. You cannot move it to the uterus. You cannot move it somewhere safe. You cannot put it in a petri dish. It is 100% going to fail. Not only is it going to fail, but by removing the option to abort that child, which it is considered abortion, it is considered, in his mind, abortion, but also legally an abortion, to remove that fetus, to remove those cells together. You basically sentence these women to death. 10% of ectopic pregnancies end in maternal deaths in the United States. 16 out of every 1,000 pregnancies are ectopic, and that's 1,600 out of every 10,000 pregnancies are ectopic, and that is happening all around us all the time. So opponent did was he told you a lot about the babies that were killed, Gen Z, millennials that are no longer on this earth because they were murdered in utero. But what he doesn't talk about is the fact that 1,600 out of every 10,000 pregnancies are ectopic and have no viability. So that's a check mark on the side of, yeah, they got an abortion, but that's not a check mark on the side of anybody was murdered. Nobody was murdered at all, because there was no chance of that thing surviving. So, and that thing being, you get what I'm saying. Then let's talk about minors. Teen pregnancy has a higher risk of both mother and infant mortality rate. So if a teenager is not allowed to receive an abortion, you heighten both her chances of dying as well as the infant's chances of dying before they even make it to the birth canal, before they're even born alive, right? So that's really, really important to think about. We're talking about teenagers here. We're talking about children and adolescents. And for those people who have, the opinion, well, teenagers shouldn't be having sex, let me give you these statistics, which are really off-putting but very important. 24.3% of births by 11 to 12-year-old mothers are fathered by adults, which is really gross. 26.8% of births by 13 to 14-year-olds are adult fathers. Men over the age of 20 years of age father 70% of all teen pregnancies being considered between the ages of 13 and 18. So these are not teenagers, making out behind the stands at the football game, making bad decisions. These are teenagers who are being preyed upon by predators and are now pregnant and can suffer high-risk pregnancies, can die. They can go through all of this and then the child dies because their bodies aren't formulated well enough. They haven't gone through puberty, and they're not strong enough to give birth to these children. So by eliminating any possibility of getting an abortion, you have sentenced these women to death. If they get an ectopic pregnancy, if they're 13 years old, giving to them by a 21-year-old out of rape and incest. And now let's talk about the women who are seeking abortions. 61% of women seeking abortions already have children. They already exist. They already have at least one child. So adolescents make up 10% of the people seeking abortions. So we're talking about both children and adults that already have kids that exist. This is not a war on babies. This is not a war on the population of the United States. These are people who already have a child and cannot afford, cannot physically give birth, cannot mentally withstand, cannot, for whatever reason, withstand having more children than they already have, which is multiple. Sorry if you can hear my birds going off. So as much as they want you to think that abortion is being used as birth control, it's like, oh, I'm pregnant, I'll just go get an abortion. I'll just get that baby vacuumed out of me. That is not what's happening at all. And there are statistics that show that women do feel very bad about getting abortions and they don't feel proud of it. And it is not a regular form of birth control for them. So just make sure that you keep that in mind. 61% of women seeking abortions are already mothers. They love kids. They're not out here trying to kill kids. They're not out here saying, screw them babies, nothing. They are mothers who, in order to provide a good enough life for the children they already have, they cannot afford, or they cannot, for whatever reason, give birth to additional children. Illegal abortion does not stop abortion. Studies have shown illegal abortions actually increase both mother and infant mortality rates across the globe. This is a global statistic. So meanwhile, the rate of abortions being sought and performed does not decrease, it remains the same. So basically, by making abortions illegal, you're not getting rid of abortion. You are just making it more dangerous and ending more lives in the process. So if you are somebody who says you are pro-life, then wouldn't it behoove you to want to make safe and healthy abortion legal so that ectopic pregnancies, so that teenage pregnancies, so that high blood pressure, preeclampsia, things that kill mothers on a regular basis can be avoided by that pregnancy being terminated and they can try again in the future. Maybe they already have children. It's harmful and it's, I would say, violent to try to insinuate that abortion is because people don't want kids with Down syndrome. That gets rid of the nuance, that gets rid of so many very important features that come with the right and the choice to have an abortion. Emphasis on the word choice. 169,000 U.S. abortion patients traveled to legal states in 2023 after the bans. 16% more than in 2020 when it was legal in those states that later made it illegal. Making abortion illegal is also racist and classist. Abortion among the upper class continues even in countries where it's illegal because they have the means to travel and recover. They also have the money to pay for these abortions and these procedures that they get. Illegal abortions greatly impact marginalized communities as low as low-income communities. So this is something to keep in mind. And if my opponent wants to hear the breakdown statistics of the races of people that seek abortions, I'm happy to go into detail there. I can provide all of those numbers. There's a direct correlation in the data between high earning, high grades, and legalized abortion in the United States, versus low income, low education, and illegal abortion. So if you want a society of people that are educated, that are able to seek jobs, that are able to make an income, and they can contribute to society, they can build their own family, they can contribute to the community, they can contribute tax-wise, they can contribute creativity-wise. Studies have shown that if you want the best for your community in terms of education, in terms of their income, future, you want to make abortion accessible and legal. 41% of people obtaining abortions in the US fall below the poverty line. Now let's talk about the economic aspects of abortion. Why it's a good economic decision, right? Maybe you're like, I don't know any women who've ever gotten pregnant from rape. I don't have any teenagers, so I don't have to worry about that. That's great. Let's talk about the economics of it all. Legal abortion lowers government spending in areas including welfare programs, Medicare costs, and it increases taxable income and economic revenue. So by not forcing people to have children that they cannot provide for, or that they cannot survive the birth of, or that for whatever reason they cannot have at this time in their life, you actually cost the economy money. You cost yourself, the taxpayer, money. You cost them money. It's not just about the punishment of people who are getting pregnant out of wedlock. Conversely, restricting abortion can cost a state over $1 billion, each state $1 billion annually in those exact same categories. And then just to kind of in closing, if my opponent wants to ask me about like the biblical aspect, things like that, we can go into that. But just keep in mind that even though abortion seems like it's this horrible thing, what it's actually doing is it's saving lives. It actually saves more lives than it kills. It doesn't kill as many lives because my opponent and I agreed on what life means, and we are not getting rid of living people. 79% of abortions occur within the first 9 weeks or earlier. There is no heartbeat. 93% of abortions occur in the first 13 weeks early. We're not talking about giving birth to babies and killing them. And yeah, that's I stand down for cross-examination.
All right. Thank you so much, Sydney, for that 15-minute opening statement. And now, Tim, let's bring Tim back into the fray here. All right. All right. So, Tim, you're up for your 20-minute cross-section, Sydney, and I'll start your time as soon as you begin to ask your first question.
All right. Thank you, Sydney. It's really
there you go. He's back.
Honor to share the virtual debate stage with Sydney. I know that she's got quite the resume in terms of debates and things like that. So it's really a personal privilege for me. Sydney, you said that you and I agree on when human life begins. But in my opening statement, I pointed out the fact that embryology textbooks, not me, embryology textbooks, affirm that human life does begin at the moment of fertilizations. Do you disagree with the embryology textbooks?
They don't agree that life begins at conception. They agree that the human body begins to form at conception. And you and I agreed that life means brain function, it means heartbeat, it means the functionality of a human being. But those are not developed until later stages. So while the human body does begin to form at conception, that is not alive, that is not living, that is not a living organism yet. That's later stage.
I didn't mention either brain or heartbeats in terms of life, but if you disagree,
you did say dead. You did say that means dead.
Right. But
so to be unalive,
the definition of life and the definition of death are going to be different. So when do you believe that human life begins?
I believe that human life begins when feelings can be felt. Maybe I would argue, okay, maybe it begins at the heartbeat. Maybe it begins at the brain function. I don't know enough about the development of a fetus to know exactly when that happens. But if I were to say, so I asked a doctor what alive means, and he was talking about heartbeat. He was talking about brain function. When those two things fail, that means death. I would say, let's say that is when life begins.
Okay, so did you hear you said heartbeat?
Yeah, or brain function.
Heartbeat or brain function, but maybe it's probably more accurate to say that you don't really know.
No, I'm not a scientist.
Okay, Would you be for abortion restrictions beginning at heartbeats and brain function?
No.
Okay. So after heartbeats and brain function, you would recognize that it is human life, but you still believe that they shouldn't have the same, that human being shouldn't have the same right to live as all other human beings.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any other category of human beings that you're okay with killing?
So here's where we differ. There is no, when the baby cannot function on its own outside the womb, there is no killing there, right? There's no death, there's no killing when it cannot function by itself. So for example, the heartbeat begins, I want to say, I could be wrong about this, but I want to say it begins at 13 weeks. Don't quote me on that. But even if there is an embryo whose heart is beating inside the mother, that embryo can still kill the mother. That embryo can still have brain formalities that won't allow it to exist outside the womb. You can't remove that embryo and have it live elsewhere so that the mother can, continue to thrive in her life. There is so much nuance. Just because something has a heartbeat doesn't mean that it is a citizen. That does not mean that it's a functioning human being. So if we look at it alive in the same way that a plant is alive in certain ways, that is life. It is alive. It is functioning. It is building organisms. It is building organs in its body. But we can't say that that is a functioning human being. And we can't say that that is a human that will survive even if the mother dies because of whatever medical abnormalities are occurring in her body and in the fetus's body as well.
Okay, so that was helpful around the plants. So we would say that plants are alive. So it sounds like you're saying, what I was going to ask you is that if you think it's not alive, then why is the abortion pill taken in two stages? First, to kill the human, or you might say the thing that's alive, and then the second one is to expel it. Do you agree that whatever is alive has to be killed first?
Yes.
Okay.
And there are definitely times where that's necessary, I would say, yes.
To be killed first?
Just in general, I think even if we agree that a heartbeat is a life, there are times where it is necessary to get rid of that life for the sake of itself or the mother. Yes.
Okay, can you tell me about one of those situations when a preterm delivery would be possible or wouldn't be possible, that you must actually kill the human being in the womb first?
Have you ever heard of hydrocephaly?
I have not.
So hydrocephaly there's different stages of hydrocephaly, but essentially what it is when there is water on the baby's brain, if the baby's brain even formed. So I think many of us have seen those really sad pictures on the internet of babies that were born very, very deformed. Hydrocephaly cannot be grown out of, it cannot be cured. It's not something that they could take medicine for whenever they're born. And children do not reach the age of adolescence when they have hydrocephaly. It's very, very rare. These are children that basically are born, they're born in pain, they're born suffering, they can't communicate. They are essentially active brain stems with heartbeats and water on their brain. And many times also giving birth to children with hydrocephaly is bad for the mother and it can kill the mother. So in the case of hydrocephaly, you already know that the baby has it. You already know that the fetus will not survive very long outside the womb, if at all, if it doesn't die in childbirth. You already know that the mother's life is at stake, but it has a brain and it has a heartbeat and it is alive. There is no viable reason to make that child live a tragic hours. Even if I've seen a couple that maybe get to 2 years old, there's no functionality. They cannot survive on their own. They cannot eat. They have to use a tube. And there's no humane reason to continue that pregnancy for either the child or the mother.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You said that abortion is a good economic position. I think I'm quoting you.
Yes.
Verbatim on that one.
Yes.
Is it a good economic position to kill any class of human beings in order to solve poverty?
Once they're alive and out of the womb, once they can survive on their own, I'm not advocating for murder. That's absolutely not what I'm advocating for. Once a baby can survive outside the womb, I'm not telling people to club these kids or to give birth to them at the hospital and suffocate them. What I'm advocating for is if you make it illegal to have an abortion, you are making it illegal in all instances. And when you make it illegal in all instances, people die. And I'm not talking about the fetus. I'm talking about people who are already alive die. I'm not talking about eugenics. I'm not talking about, oh, I just don't want the inconvenience of having this child with hydrocephaly. I'm talking about real economic troublesome problems that come with forcing people to have children that should not have been conceived, be it through rape, be it through incest, be it through she was asleep and didn't even know something was happening to her, or be it through, I want this baby, I have children, this child is developing outside of my uterus. I'm not allowed to expel this thing that might have a heartbeat but will not survive in any capacity outside of the womb, because that's what an ectopic pregnancy is. 100% of them are unviable. I view it similar, if I may, I view it similar to the death penalty. I am not a fan of the death penalty because even one innocent person is too many. I am not a fan of making abortion illegal because mother dying is too many. Even one woman bleeding out too far, one teenager being forced to give birth to a child that belongs to her stepfather is too many. So it needs to be legal, but it's an option. We're not saying it needs to be mandatory. We're not saying it needs to be a regular form of birth control or affordable. We're saying it needs to be an option to save lives. And it also does come with economic benefits. Yes.
Okay, I'm glad you described it, ectopic pregnancy.
Mhm.
Are you aware of any pro-life or abolitionist individual that thinks ectopic pregnancies should be, or removing the fetus or zygote in an ectopic pregnancy should be illegal?
Yes. Current laws right now in the United States make the removal of an ectopic pregnancy in the state of Tennessee and in the state of Texas illegal. I think also in Louisiana and Oklahoma. It covers all forms of abortion, and that's the problem. It covers all forms of abortion. So even these women who are forced to basically stick around into the hospital until they're bleeding out and there is no pulse in their utero, they have to technically stay there because they're not allowed to have an abortion. This is real. You can look it up. There's so many instances of this happening.
Is there any possibility that you might be misunderstanding the legislation?
No, there's not. I've read it. It's disturbing.
Right, I'll restate the question. Is there any pro-life individual or abolitionist that you've spoken with that you could tell us about that believes that an ectopic pregnancy is an abortion that should be illegal?
Yes, there are people who think abortion under any circumstance should be illegal, and there are lawmakers that have passed those laws in their states, Texas being number one. They're the ones who make the news for the most women dying because they can't have an abortion with their ectopic pregnancy, unfortunately.
Yeah, so actually, I'm glad you mentioned the Texas law. That was actually the definition of abortion that I mentioned from a legal standpoint, differentiating it from a medical standpoint versus a legal definition. I am going to read that to you, and I do have a question.
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm sticking to questions on it. So legally speaking, from the state of Texas, it's, quote, an act of using or prescribing an instrument, a drug, a medicine, or any other substance, device, or means with the intent to cause the death of an unborn child.
Okay.
So my question is for you is, do you believe that when a medical provider removes an ectopic pregnancy, their intent is to kill the zygote or fetus?
I mean, if it's already at the stage where there might be a heartbeat or whatever you consider signs of life, that's what they have to do in order to commit that abortion. Like that's unfortunately what they have to do, because it's either the ectopic pregnancy or it's the mother. The ectopic pregnancy will die no matter what, but it's not dead yet. And the mother could potentially die if not treated by getting an abortion to get rid of the ectopic pregnancy.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm?
You said that I'll quote you again here too, and let you correct the record before I ask my question. Being anti-abortion is racist and classist. Is that right?
Yes.
Right.
And now let me clarify. That doesn't make people a racist who believes that. The action of making it illegal is the racist act. If you don't think abortion should be allowed, that doesn't make you a racist. But inherently, the law, once implemented, once it impacts the communities that it impacts, is a racist law. So I want to clarify. I'm not calling Tim a racist, and I'm not telling anybody who's pro-life a racist.
I am advocating that abortion should be legal, so I think I probably fit your definition of racist, but that's okay.
So I don't think you are doing it for the sake of getting rid of Black or Latino populations, but once it becomes illegal, those are some of the marginalized individuals that it will impact the most.
Certainly. Do you agree that if abortion had been illegal for the past 50 years, that there would be more people of color alive today than there wouldn't be if given the laws that we have on the books today?
If it had, say that again.
Do you agree that if abortion had been illegal for the past 50 years, that there would be substantially more people of color alive today?
I mean, statistically, it depends, but statistically, probably there would be more people in general. Therefore, there would be more people of color.
All right. Tell me a little bit, I want to ask you specifically, do human beings have inherent value?
Yes, I think so.
Is that objectively true or just your opinion?
I mean, I like to think that everybody thinks that way, but unfortunately, anybody who's been on the internet more than 10 minutes knows that there are people that have differing opinions on that. But yeah, I think humans have varying degrees of value, absolutely. But everybody has value.
So what about a human life that is unwanted and the mother intends to terminate it?
Mm-hmm.
Does that life have value?
Once it can exist as a life, then yes. But in the womb, before it can exist on its own as a life, it doesn't have the same amount of value as the mother.
At what point can a human being exist independently as a life?
I don't know. You'd have to ask a doctor. I think it's like something like the third trimester. I don't know. You'd have to ask a doctor.
But even then, it would be with great help, with great assistance.
Yes.
And
yes.
You recognize that even a born baby, full-term
mm-hmm.
born baby, requires tremendous assistance in order
sure.
to live.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So even though that baby still has a great dependency on the mother, especially along with the fathers and adults,
mm-hmm.
Is it okay to kill that human life?
Of course not.
But wasn't your standard that as soon as it's able to live independently, and we've already established that the baby cannot live independently?
So my definition of independently is literally like breathing, being alive. Mothers don't have to help their children breathe. Mothers don't have to help their children's heartbeat. They don't have to perform CPR in their infants every day. Their brain functions. Just because it can't stand up on its own does not mean that it can't exist, right?
So it sounds to me a lot that you're separating humanity from personhood. Would you agree with that?
I need more detail on that. What do you mean?
So you might disagree with the embryology textbooks we talked about. When they
mm-hmm.
say it's human life at the moment of fertilization,
mm-hmm.
and it grows and it develops,
mm-hmm.
never changes species,
okay.
but at some other point, it has value that the value develops, like
mm-hmm.
it develops into a point to where we should have laws that say, hey, you can't kill it.
Mm-hmm.
So you agree with that?
Yeah.
You terms like, okay, we recognize it's human, but it's not really a person yet.
So, I mean, a baby is a person. Like an infant in your arms is a person to me, and I would never advocate for the murder of a baby once it's outside of the womb.
So it's location, not necessarily stage of independence. It's got to be outside the womb.
Well, it's not an independent stage if it still necessitates the womb.
Okay, so the womb specifically.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there a time in history when any class of human being was considered not to be or less than a full person? And was it actually a good thing?
No, it wasn't a good thing. But there's unfortunately still, even today, that's happening all over the world. But it's never been a good thing.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right. On October 31st of this year, a man named Jorge Alvarez
mm-hmm.
was drunk and drove his car into oncoming traffic. He collided with an SUV, which then rolled onto its roof and caught fire. The driver
mm-hmm.
of the SUV, a 33-year-old pregnant mother,
mm-hmm.
survived with serious injuries, but her 5.5-month-old unborn child was killed. Jorge was charged with 3 felonies, and here's my question. First-degree reckless homicide causing the death of an unborn child.
Mm-hmm.
homicide by intoxicated use of a vehicle, and first-degree reckless injury. Based on this information, in your opinion, are these charges that Jorge Alvarez received, were they just?
Yes, I think so. Because the child was not in Jorge's body. It was not Jorge's decision whether or not to continue that pregnancy. It would not impact Jorge's health whether or not that pregnancy continued. So at the point where the mother's consent is removed and she is the vital being giving life to that life, then at the point where consent is removed, a crime is committed. An abortion is not anybody driving a truck into a woman and killing her child. An abortion is a medical procedure that is very important to have rights to as a mother and as the being carrying the child. So she wanted that child. That child was killed by somebody other than her, not part of a medical procedure, not part of a life-saving any kind of thing at all. Then yeah, I would say that counts.
All right, we agree, and I appreciate your use of language, child and killing. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned consent.
Mm-hmm.
Is the human life, when it is terminated through an abortion, is that life able to consent?
It's not even able to have conscious thoughts. So no, it's not able to consent because there's no consciousness whatsoever.
Okay. Are you able to kill someone that doesn't have consciousness?
Once they're like out of the womb?
Uh-huh.
It depends. There are places in the world where unconscious people can make the prior authorization to end their life. I mean, even in the United States, you can sign a do not resuscitate, a DNR, and that is essentially killing somebody who doesn't have brain activity and doesn't have consciousness, and it's consensual because the person decided. Or in my case, my husband is my what's it called? The legal, he can make these decisions for me once I'm not conscious anymore. And I told him, do not resuscitate. So he could, in effect, give permission to kill me, even if I'm technically alive, but I'm brain dead and I don't have a consciousness.
Do you see a difference in the DNR in choosing not to actively attempt a resuscitation versus actually intervening to end a life? Like, I'm going to do this and it will result in this, or a DNR being, I'm not going, the body has, for some other reason, shut down. Do you see a difference?
Well, it's called pulling the plug for a reason, because pulling the plug to the life-saving mechanisms is what kills you, essentially. So even if the remainder of my body could continue to live like Terry Schiavo, you know, even if the rest of my body continues to grow, continues to have periods, continues to go through postmenopause and premenopause, that doesn't mean that at any point I was conscious or I could make any form of decision on my own for the betterment of what's going on around me.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Marlon. I think that's my time.
All right. That is your time. Definitely. You had like 18 seconds though, but if you want that.
No,
all right. Cool. All right. That's it. Thank you guys for that. Great engagement. Appreciate it. So now we're going to jump into the rebuttal rounds. Once again, it's going to be 2 5-minute of rebuttals, so a total of 10 minutes each for each person of rebuttals. And so during the rebuttals, guys, there's rebuttals are going to go fast, audience. So get your questions in, and obviously super chats get the priority. So get your questions in. Don't wait till the last minute. Get them in now, because we will be having a 30-minute Q&A at the end of the debate. So that's it. I believe, Tim, you're up first for the rebuttal, I believe. And yeah, let me make sure. Yep. So you got 5 minutes for your rebuttal. I'm going to take Sydney off the stage. And so once again, I will start your 5-minute timer as soon as you begin to speak. So you got the floor.
All right. Thank you, Marlon. Okay. What we heard beginning from my opponent was just not true, that we agree on the definition of life. I think that was some clever wording there. I can't pull up the statistics for you all tonight, but you'll have to, for those of you that care, which if you're watching the stream, I think it's probably most of you, if this is how you're choosing to spend your Friday night, do care in this kind of discussion. But to do your own research, just do a simple Google search and type embryology textbooks, the beginning of human life. It is life from the moment of fertilization. This is the science behind it. Something that is dead cannot grow and develop and suck thumbs and all of these other things that happen so early on in human life. So it is a human being. The scientific perspective is that it is a human being from the beginning. Sydney mentioned a lot in her opening statement about the medical necessity of abortions, and that. But to be really clear here, folks, an abortion is the intentional killing of the human being inside the womb. In my opening statement, I mentioned the statement on abortion by 107 obstetricians and gynecologists that affirm this is not me, this is not Tim, who's not a medical professional. This is credentialed, real practicing providers that have stated that a abortion is never medically necessary to provide evidence-based care. Now, what we are not talking about, and my opponent here is seriously mistaken about the removal of ectopic pregnancies being illegal in the state of Tennessee. She's just wrong, just misguided on that one. You guys will have to do your own research to look that up as well. There are a lot of examples of tragic cases that we could look into where that news sources such as ProPublica and other sources have said, the tragic situation where this woman has died because she wasn't able to receive the abortion that she so desperately needed. Portia Gumezi, Amber Nicole Thurman, Candy Miller, had those come up, I would have been happy to have gotten into the circumstances of those cases. But as we look in the details, not what the headlines have said on the ProPublica news articles or what is spinning in the news cycle, an abortion was not needed to save the life of those mothers. It was either, and oftentimes it's actually the abortion pill that ended up causing sepsis. It was the abortion pill that ended the life of the mother and not the actual delivery of the baby. So medical professionals are becoming very, very clear. Abortion is not necessary to provide evidence-based care. No pro-life or abolitionist is seriously talking about banning ectopic pregnancies, because again, the difference there is that in an ectopic pregnancy, the mother's life is already in danger and the child will not survive. So it must be removed. Now, perhaps medical advancements will have a method to where we can take the implanted fetus and put it rightly back into the universe. And if that happens, praise the Lord, that would be fantastic. But in those circumstances, the baby will naturally die. And if it's not removed, then so will the mother. Pro-lifers and abolitionists agree that in those circumstances, the removal of that fetus is necessary. But the key difference is the intentional killing of that human life. And Sydney also mentioned, or seemed to suggest, that in the 65 million abortions that I mentioned, 2,800, 3,000 per day, and things like that, that ectopic pregnancies drive up those numbers, and that those numbers consist of ectopic pregnancies. But according to the CDC, that's actually not true. Those numbers only include abortion procedures with the intent to terminate a suspected or known intrauterine pregnancy. That means that the life is inside of the uterus, not ectopic pregnancies. Again, I think maybe she's just mistaken on it, but ectopic pregnancies are not 65, are not driving up that 65 million number. And I'll go ahead and stop right there.
Yeah, about 40 seconds.
I'm good.
All right. Cool. All right, Sydney, you're up for your 5-minute rebuttal. And same as Tim, I will start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
Perfect. So thanks for having me. So something that's really important that I need everybody to just really hone in on is not what my opponent is saying, but it's what my opponent is not saying and what he's not addressing. For example, he didn't address that the United States has the highest mother and infant mortality rate of any first world nation. We talked about this in the very beginning of my opening statement. Because of our laws that are archaic regarding abortion being healthcare, we have the highest rate of potentially avoidable infant mortality rate and motherhood mortality rate because those pregnancies didn't have to continue to birth where the mother dies. Then he didn't address what I talked about, teens dying because they got pregnant by grown men. This happens on a regular basis. I even stated 24.3% of those 11 to 12-year-olds who are giving birth were fathered by men over the age of 21. Then he skips over the stats that abolishing abortion doesn't even lower abortion. It doesn't even lower the number of abortions. So by making it illegal, you are literally only sentencing women to death. You are not resolving the issue of abortion. We could talk all day. I've got a list of things that could really, really help with the number of abortions that need to be performed. We could talk about education all day. We could talk about sex ed and the education system. But at the end of the day, even if you make abortion illegal, the studies show, Center for Disease Control, National Institute of Health, YaleMedicine.org, World Health Organization, Pew Research Center, shows that it doesn't lower the number of abortions. So all you're doing is sentencing women to death. You know, he talks about how the abortion pill causes sepsis, and that's actually what killed the mother. But what he doesn't talk about is in Texas, in the state of Texas, in the instances where women have gotten sepsis from the abortion pill and died because of it, was not because of the sepsis, but because the sepsis could not be removed by doctors because they can be sued by the state for performing an abortion. And in the state of Texas, tissue, even if it has a heartbeat, even if it has no consciousness, tissue that is not removed from the mother in a timely manner is considered a child, is considered a baby, is considered life, and is not allowed to be removed, or the doctor can even go to jail. I'm not making this up. You can look it up. So yes, by the abortion pill, and oh, that's so bad, and the mother wouldn't be in this position if she hadn't taken the abortion pill. The abortion pill itself is not what's killing her. What's killing her is the doctor saying, I do not want to be legally liable for this failed abortion pill that is causing sepsis when there is still technically tissue in there that belongs to a fetus, and I can go to jail. This is real, and it happens all the time. He also didn't touch at all on the number of women who are seeking abortions who have children. He wants you to focus on, oh, this many Gen Z, this many millennials have been murdered in the past some odd years. But what he doesn't focus on are those statistics. He doesn't talk about, one, how many of those would have even lived to begin with. How many of those Gen Z that are being killed in abortions would have even survived outside the womb? We could talk about that all day long. But he just skips over so many of the really, truly important nuances that make these laws so important. Abortion is a choice. It is not mandatory. Gay marriage being legal doesn't mean you have to get gay married. Weed being legal doesn't mean you have to get high. Abortion being legal doesn't mean you have to have an abortion. I hopefully will never in my life necessitate an abortion. And if I were to get pregnant tomorrow with a perfectly viable infant, I would not have an abortion. But I do believe that abortion should be a medically necessary choice for people who mentally, physically, emotionally, financially cannot afford these children, as well as children that will not continue to exist and live a full life outside of the womb. We talked about hydrocephaly. There are so many things that he narrows down to eugenics, like, oh, this lady doesn't want to have a kid with Down syndrome. That's eugenics. What he doesn't talk about is the immense terror and horror that these children go through when they're born with these brain stems missing and things that happen on a regular basis where they cannot live, they cannot thrive outside of the womb. Why would you want to give birth to a child with hydrocephaly who is never going to live a pain-free life? Thank you. Is never going to have consciousness. So the nuance is what is important here. I'm not saying a baby should be dashed against rocks, although the Bible says that, and we can get into that at a later time. That once they're born, I'm not saying that this life does not count as anything other than, oh, just a cell, expel it. I'm saying at the end of the day, more people die when they need these medically necessary abortions that are necessary for their health and survival when they are illegal versus when they are not illegal. And if you are pro-life and if you truly value all life, as I know my opponent does, and I don't say that disingenuously, he would understand that allowing abortion to be an option is pertinent and necessary and has to be part of helping children and babies thrive once they are outside the womb and helping mothers thrive and saving lives on a regular basis in this country.
All right, that's time. Thank you so much, Sydney, for that. All right, Tim, you're back in rebuttal seat here, and so I'm gonna get you back on stage. And Tim, I will start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
All right, guys, now we're having fun. All right, so Sydney mentions that we have the highest infant mortality rate in the world, but that is probably true. And certainly a lot of factors that go into that influence medical outcomes. And the solution to reduce infant mortality is never to kill the infant, which is what pro-choice, pro-aborts are advocating for. If you just kill the baby, then there's no baby to cause infant mortality rates. But that would be 100% infant mortality rates. out of Texas, Sydney is probably talking about Portia Gumezi, and doctors saying that they were afraid to provide a D&C. But if you'll go dig in this case, there is no doctor that treated her that said that. If this is all speculation by other people around the case, not the medical professionals, not the medical records that said that. Rather, it's propaganda that spun up to support the pro-abort position. When Portia Gumezi got to the hospital, she should have received a D&C, which is not prohibited by Texas law. Again, not prohibited by Texas law, because the radiologist confirmed through an ultrasound there was a pregnancy sac, but no heartbeat and no embryo to be seen. When both pro-life and pro-abortion doctors look at this case, they both agree, pro-life doctors too, that a D&C should have been given to Portia Gumezi. She did not receive the best health care possible. And when we're not honest about it, when we're said more interested in perpetuating pro-abortion propaganda, we prohibit the mothers from receiving the justice that they actually deserve. Sydney mentioned mothers with kids, like I didn't mention it. Yeah, of course I didn't mention it, because my solution to poor economic families is not to kill the poor kids. Because my position, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that every human being is worthy of equal protection under the law. That's why we have things like adoption. And yes, there are the line of families waiting to adopt babies is vastly longer than there are babies to be adopted. Now, when you get later into the foster system, there's about 400,000 kids in the foster system, and the goal of the foster system is always reunification with the parents first. But when it comes to babies, the list of people that are open and willing to adopt babies is not the problem. It's not lack of people. It's lack of babies. So to say that mothers with kids should be able to kill their unborn children doesn't fit, because number one, it devalues human life. You have to either say, yeah, it's a human being, but I don't care. They should have the ability to kill the human being because the family is poor, it doesn't have the economic means to support the child. But when we cite economic reasons in support of abortion, I mean, in what circumstances? Hey, we have an impoverished town. Well, let's go kill half the humans in that town, and then the town won't be so impoverished anymore. That's never a solution. Now, you're going to hear more from me in my closing statement in just a minute about how do we go forward with the abolition of abortion and things like that. But the solution is never to kill the kids with disabilities or to eliminate Down syndrome. He did respond to that a little bit and seemed to avoid, I felt like, the fact that parents in Iceland are choosing to kill the preborn human beings that have trisomy 21 Down syndrome. Would she also support being sex selective in terms of abortion? Is that valid? It sounds like it. It sounds like Sydney is willing to move to either the location case or the consciousness case or the development case, kind of whatever fits the question the most, in order to get her case across. But at a baseline, my position is very simple, and that is this: as the United States, and expressed in the Declaration of Independence, that we need to continually try to live up to, is that every human being has a right to live. Every human being. There's no category of human being that doesn't deserve equal protection under the law. And Sydney cannot affirm that statement. She must recognize that there are some humans that don't have the right to live, that don't deserve the same protections, that only, in the car accident scenario we talked about, she said, yeah, it's just because the mother wanted the baby. But the mother could take that same baby the next day into an abortionist and kill it, and it would be, in her view, an okay thing to do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. And so we'll get Sydney back in for her final rebuttal. And Sydney, once again, I'll start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
Sorry, I was mute. So I think it's really important. I think it's really, really important that we don't get lost in the sauce here. My opponent wants you to think that I'm pro-abortion, that everybody should get an abortion. I'm not. I'm pro-choice. I'm pro leaving abortion legal so that those who need it to survive can have it. I'm not out here advocating it as a form of birth control, right? I'm not out here saying that, oh, you should try it. It's great. Never had one. Hopefully never have to have one. What I'm advocating for is the idea that in my opponent's argument, when we outlaw abortion entirely, when we outlaw getting an abortion in any state in the United States, we condemn people to die. And I'm curious why it's more important that we focus on zygotes who my opponent and I agreed death, a dead person, a person who is not alive, is somebody who has no heartbeat, has no brain activity. We agreed on that. So before you've developed a heartbeat, before you've developed brain activity, you are not alive. That's we agreed on that. Like, I'm not even being shady. We agreed on that at the beginning of this. What he is advocating for is a system that will not decrease abortions globally or in the United States. Removing abortion as a legal option does not get rid of the abortions happening. It makes them less safe and it causes more deaths, this time the death of the mother. So if you are a pro-life person, you would agree that having abortion as an option is important. He calls a DNC one of the most important things that you could, like, pieces or medical things you can get done. He says that. He says it's very important to get a DNC. What he doesn't understand is that in Texas, in Oklahoma, in parts of the United States that have outlawed abortion, the language also outlaws DNCs. DNCs still fetal tissue in the womb. He states a specific case. I'm not sure who Portia is. I was not talking about that case. So regardless of what happened to that individual, it sounds like it was horrible. We cannot outlaw abortion because then the language that outlaws abortion outlaws what he calls very important life-saving procedures, DNCs. We're talking about ectopic pregnancies. He seems to think that's not important. He seems to not like that topic that I keep bringing up, but he's never had one and he never will have one. And I'm somebody who could particularly have one in my lifetime. And I would hope that in those moments, people would understand I'm not murdering the child. I am saving my own life in lieu of a clump of cells that never stood a chance as an ectopic pregnancy to survive. So as much as he wants you to think that I'm sitting here, just this liberal atheist, telling you to go get an abortion, I am not pro-death. I am not pro-eugenics. I am not pro-abortion. I am pro-choice. I am pro the option to have an abortion if that is what you need to have, whether it's for your physical well-being, whether it's for your mental health, whether it's for your economic benefit. You cannot afford to have more children. He said it himself. How many kids? Over 400,000 kids are in the foster care system. And guess what? Foster adoptions have lowered 29% since 2019 because of the economy. So when I talk about abortion being an economic benefit, I'm talking about the people who cannot afford their children, continually put them in the foster care system, and they do not get adopted because people cannot afford to adopt children anymore, right? People, I certainly cannot afford to adopt a child. I noticed my opponent did not bring that up when I was asking him why he didn't adopt a child. He was talking about waiting, doing it later, and tried to make it sound about age. But I think we all know that children are expensive. They're very expensive. So at the end of the day, I am not pro murdering children. I am pro saving lives, and the statistics do not lie in lives, especially the lives of women, especially the lives of marginalized women and individuals in groups such as people of color, Native Americans. We need to make sure that abortion is accessible. I even said I'm not pro death penalty. Why? Because one person dying innocently is too many. Why do I think abortion should be legal?
1
Because
minute.
one child giving birth to an infant that either dies or maybe was conceived in rape, one person having a child with hydrocephaly and watching that child die once it's born because they were forced to give birth to it, that is too many. There are so many negatives associated with not allowing abortion to be an option in the United States. The biggest one being it doesn't stop abortion. So if you don't like abortion, hopefully you understand why I'm trying to let you know making it illegal is not the way to get rid of abortion. What you're doing is you're condemning people to death. And if you truly are pro-life, that is not a stance that you should have. It doesn't line up with pro-life beliefs. So again, I am not pro the murder of babies, eugenics. I don't think there's any class of human being that doesn't deserve life or doesn't deserve to exist among us. But what I am pro is options, life saving, money saving on an economic grand scale, billions of dollars, and the option to not have to carry to term a child that will kill you, that will die once it is out of
All
the
right, that's
womb.
time.
And I rest, I stand. I rest or
All
stand. I don't
right,
know.
thank you. Thank you for that. All right, let's bring Tim back in. I think we're going to our rebuttal rounds now. And so, not rebuttal, but closing, should I say. It'll be 10-minute closing. And Sydney, you're actually first up
Yeah.
for your 10-minute closing. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we could jump right into it. Sydney, I give you
Sure.
back the floor here.
Mhm.
And Tim, you're back out.
Yeah. So my
And
opponent.
so go ahead, Sydney.
Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't actually agreed on several things. We agreed that people who drive drunk and run into pregnant women and kill the fetus, those people deserve to pay for that. And I agree. We agreed that somebody who is dead, who is not alive, does not have brain function, does not have a consciousness, does not have a heart functionality. We agreed on that. I think where we're getting mixed in the weeds here is he thinks that my response to that is everybody should just be allowed to kill babies willy-nilly no matter what happens. Even, you know what, even after they're born, you should kill a baby, which is not at all what I'm advocating for, not at all what I touched on. What I talked about is the number of people who die who are already living, they're already existing conscious human beings. Maybe they're Christian, maybe they're not, who knows? Maybe they're Americans, maybe they're not, who die because they don't have access to abortion. I talked about the number of those fetuses who also die along with the mother. We talked about teenage births, we talked about ectopic pregnancies, we talked about hydrocephaly, to name a few. He tries to make it sound like these abortions were elective, like women just walked in and said, nah, give me one of those, and number 3, abortion with a side of fries. That's not what is happening here. What's happening is insurance companies are saying, oh, that's considered elective, therefore check for the elective. They're not taking into consideration, and neither is my opponent, how many people want these children. They have these children. They want the baby that would eventually be born of this embryo. And for whatever reason, there are instances in which they cannot carry this child to term or should not carry this child to term. And that is where we really just, I think, lose one another. Is I agree with him. I agree that babies, once they're born, should be taken care of. They should have food to eat. They should have houses. They should have parents who care for them. They should not be made to suffer in a world where they don't belong or they shouldn't have been born into for one reason or another, whether it's a birth defect or something that's going to cause their life. Where we disagree is his solution to that, which the statistics, World Health, Center for Disease Control, National Institute of Health, the statistics show that his resolution to that issue, that problem of babies being killed in utero, is to make abortion illegal, which is not it's not the solution at all. If we had more time, I could go into all sorts of solutions. I mentioned sex ed in school, right? If you're never pregnant to begin with, you don't have to terminate a pregnancy. And I love that for you, right? Whoever you are. So that's where I think it's really important that we don't let the language and the graphic nature of describing an abortion and all of these things cloud, at the end of the day, what's important here. And that is access to abortion saves lives. Making abortion illegal does not end abortions. There are many different reasons why allowing abortion to be an option for people is positive. I mentioned once economically, and there is billions of dollars there, but he's going to make it sound like for the sake of eugenics and money, I want you to get rid of your baby. Not the case at all. And it is a choice. It's a choice. Do I think you should abort your baby? No. Do I want you to have the option if for whatever reason you are not ready, not fit, not mentally, physically able to get rid of the child, right? Or to give birth to the child, should you be able to have an abortion? Yes. Yes. And that includes anybody watching this. It's none of my business if you get an abortion, but I hope that if that ever happens, if you ever have an ectopic pregnancy, you are able to receive the care that you need, which is what abortion is. It is health care for women in order to continue to thrive and even survive in a country where we rank number 1 in mother and infant mortality rate. More women and babies die directly due to childbirth in the United States than any country. And the way to fix that is not to outlaw abortion. The way to cause more imminent death is to outlaw abortion. The way to get people to stop having abortions is not to outlaw abortion. Those are not the ways that you get rid of abortion. If you truly want to end abortion, then let's talk about education. Let's talk about all the different systems that we could build and we could believe in and we could vote for that would allow the number of abortions to drop. Letting it become illegal is not the resolution, and it's not the solution to the problem, and it will not end abortion. And I think that is the most important thing I can say. If you take nothing away from anything else I've said today, if you want abortions to stop, making them illegal is not the way to do it. I rest my case.
All right, thank you for that. All right, Tim, you're back in the seat for your closing, 10-minute closing. And so once again, Tim, I'll start your time as soon as you begin to speak.
All right. Thank you, Marlon. So from the moment of conception, a unique, living, whole human being exists, though it certainly still has much development ahead of it. No one may lawfully kill an innocent human being. Therefore, no one may lawfully kill the unborn. Every human being deserves equal protection under the law. This is the ground floor that we need to build upon. This is a basic and most foundational principle and ought to inform our legislation at both the federal and state levels. So now let me reiterate 3 core pieces of information that you heard tonight. Number 1, we've established that science demonstrates it's a human life from the moment of conception. Embryology textbooks universally affirm this as a biological reality. Number 2, the right to not be killed underlies all other rights. Everything is downstream from this. You have no other rights if you do not also have a right to not be killed. Number 3, from the very founding of our nation, we have affirmed that all human beings have value and the right to life. But we have still not lived up to this standard that's been set forth so long ago. True equality demands that we defend the smallest members of our human family and surround mothers with tangible support, not lethal solutions. To summarize some of the things that we heard from Sydney, to oppose the full equality of all human beings, Sydney hopped around from bodily autonomy to location inside, outside the wombs, just like I predicted in my opening statement, to consciousness or brain activity and things like that. And while there are heartbreaking cases, rape, disability, poverty, these do not change the basic moral status of the child. Instead, they call us to a greater compassion, not violence. Legalized abortion doesn't deliver justice. Instead, it creates another victim. Sydney also mentioned infant mortality rates around the world again. To solve infant mortality rates in an abortion, an infant always dies. A baby always dies. A human being always dies. Sydney said in her closing that she's not pro-abortion, but really she said she's pro-choice. But to describe Sydney's position, she's pro whatever you want. If you want to be a eugenicist, if you want to selectively terminate less physically developed human beings, you should be able to do that. If you want a girl or a boy and you find out that you're going to have the opposite of what you want, you should be able to kill that human being. That is the logical end of Sydney's position. Sydney said in her closing that adoptions have lowered. So, and then connected to so abortion is needed. Again, I've already pointed out that there are not babies waiting to be adopted. There are many more families waiting to adopt babies. It sounded like she's for mercy killing. She said babies shouldn't have to suffer. Talking about babies born with disabilities, but who are we to set death dates? Now, I know this is coming from the political left. They are pushing choice and death at the beginning of life, and now we're seeing a new trend where we're bringing death in and setting death dates at the end of life as well. And so I understand that there is this idea of being mercy or having mercy and things like that, but it is not our role to decide when a human life, a full human life, independent DNA, an independent being, gets to live or gets to die. And with that, the final thing I want to say is, of course, we must have a positive vision for the future. We need robust prenatal care. We need reforms to make the process of adoption more accessible. Sydney called me out on that, and I was already planning on talking about that. We need to encourage community-based aid from churches, charities, even government programs. I'm so grateful for organizations in my community, such as the Pregnancy Care Center and Alliance Family Services, that offer this kind of support to both mothers and fathers in need. The work that they do is so essential. And of course, the last thing I want to mention before we end is that if you have had an abortion, if you did make the decision to kill your preborn child, I want you to hear this from me, that there is freedom and forgiveness at the foot of the cross. Jesus will cast your sin into the sea and remember it no more if you will only turn from your sins and place your trust in him. And with that, I look forward to getting into the audience questions in just a second. Thank you, Marlon.
All right. Thank you. Let's get Sydney back in here as well. Thank you both for an exciting, wonderful debate. I love the conversation. You guys kept it definitely respectful and honoring each other in this discussion. Appreciate that. And so now we're going to jump into the Q&A. We have about a 30 minutes, something around, depending on enough questions we have saved from the audience to extend it to a 30 minutes. So we'll let the questions lead us there. And so the way this is going to work, you guys each have 1 minute each to answer the question. And then the person that the question was initially for gets 30 seconds to have the last word on that particular question. So we're going to start with the first question here. This question doesn't necessarily show who it's for, but it says TGT question: as a mother who gave birth despite medical advice, should all abortions, including the ones that are medically necessary, be banned? If not, where do we draw that line and who decides? I don't know. Tim, you want to take this one first?
That's a great question. So I mentioned in the beginning of my opening statement the list of 107 obstetrician gynecologists that are affirming that an abortion is not necessary, but a preterm delivery may be. And a preterm delivery, the difference is where the baby needs to be delivered through cesarean section or vaginal delivery. But the step they're not taking is to kill the child before its delivery. So I agree with those medical professionals. But then in instances like ectopic pregnancies that we're talking about, there is discretion that doctors need to be able to give. And there's language in the Texas law that we were talking about that affords medical professionals that kind of discretion. But what you can't do is say we're going to work with the intent of killing the child first and then delivering it. Then you can respond to that. We can do like over the questions too.
So, I mean, I think this person knows how I feel about this, right? In the event that something can potentially be deadly, I think the option to have an abortion is really, really important. And I think the legislation that bans even for lack of a better term, even the elective abortions, what it does is it basically forces people to either go somewhere unhealthy, somewhere that's not a doctor's office, to get an abortion, backdoor abortions, right? We see it happen all the time. Or it forces someone basically to die of something that could have easily been cured if abortion had been allowed. But unfortunately, especially in this country, the language that makes abortion illegal oftentimes makes life-saving procedures illegal as well. And we can, get into the weeds on that, but we see it in so many red states, especially. So just like I said about the death penalty, in the event that even one person dies of something that could have been avoided if being granted an abortion, then that's too many people. And unfortunately, I think we absolutely need to make it an accessible healthcare option for people who are going to have babies.
All right. Tim, 30 seconds.
Sorry, I was not prepared.
Oh yeah, sorry. I thought we were all just like responding to it.
The legislation in Texas provides like specific language, and I've got it right here. During a pregnancy emergency, physicians may use their reasonable medical judgment to determine when to intervene, and the risk of maternal death does not even need to be imminent. It just needs to be possible. And this is, doctors have to make these kinds of decisions today. But again, go check out that statement on abortion by 107 obstetricians and gynecologists. It's got it addresses all different kinds of things: constitutionality, medical scenarios, bodily autonomy, and these are OBGYNs that have written this statement. So don't just take my word for it. Go read the medical professionals, and I want I hope everybody understands what their options are when they go seek medical care.
All right. This question's for, well, it's not, once again, another question that doesn't have a name to it, but Sydney, you can hear this one first. Here it says, is there any estimate for the number of aborted children who would otherwise been healthy births, which would not have been difficulty being placed for adoption?
So I would like to first address the last half of that statement. It would not have been difficult being placed for adoption. I think what we're doing when we talk about abortion is we're making it sound like these mothers don't care about their children, or that it should be easy to give children up for adoption. And I don't know if you've ever spoken to somebody who had to give their children up for adoption, but I actually interviewed multiple people that I know who had to give up their first children for adoption. And they talked about the pain of giving up their child equating the pain of their child dying. So there's this idea that, oh, you can just give it up for adoption. You can just, just give it up for adoption. When in reality, that is also a very painful thing to go through. And we should not lean on the system of government to take care of children that we can't take care of ourselves, and that are going to sit in the foster system with only a 25% chance of being adopted before they age out of the system, which is lowered by 6% since 2019. So while I don't know the exact number of abortions that happened for medical reasons where they would have been non-viable had they been born, I do know the statistics on sexual assault in the foster care system, the number of kids who never get adopted, the number of kids who never they have a term for it. I forget what it's called, but essentially get adopted and just age out of the system by going to whatever home can take them. And so the idea that the answer be just put the kid up for adoption, I don't think that's a very pro-life stance to have either, because if you've ever done any reading on what it's like to live in the foster care system, it's not a life. It's a terrible life, and it's very sad and tragic, often fraught with abuse and in a personal instance, a friend has a child that was born with a drug addiction, she basically adopted a baby that was addicted to drugs and had to let him just wean off of drugs for the first several months of his life. And it was screaming and crying, and that takes a toll on her children as well that she had biologically. So I think what we need to focus on with questions like this is, I'm not sure, to answer your question, how many of those births would have been viable had they been carried to term. But there is no ease and there is no lack of difficulty in deciding what happens to a child after it's born when you cannot yourself care for that child.
All right. Tim?
So, yeah, I think that the consistent answer there from Sydney's perspective is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many babies, infants, fetuses were killed that were viable, because that's not, I agree, that's not her position. Her position is just pro whatever you want, pro eugenics, pro sex selection, whatever the circumstances are that you want to choose, and whether or not to kill that human life is the womb. She's the cheerleader for you to make that decision. It doesn't really matter what the context of it is. Growing up, I actually had the privilege that my mother was an adoption social worker. And so I was always hearing about her work that she was doing. And we actually had babies coming through our house that were going through the adoption process. And I had the privilege of knowing very closely many of these mothers that not only adopted, but that chose to place their children for adoption. And of course, I would affirm that obviously to place a child for an adoption, it's a hard decision. It would be hard for anybody to do that. But it is a loving decision to place that baby into the care of a family that will eagerly want to care for it. And it would be an absolute myth. No, I wouldn't say myth. I would say a falsity to say that if you have a baby and you want to place it for adoption, that it's at any risk of just going into the foster care system to be turned. People are not having babies and saying, I want to place my baby for adoption. There are no families that want to adopt. There are long lists of families that are desperately wanting to adopt. They have to go through home studies. They have to be chosen by birth mothers. And before that ever happens. Now, I did mention that there's over 400,000 children in the foster care system. And they're in there because the state has taken custody at later stages of life and things like that. But the idea to suggest that mothers are having babies, or choosing to have the baby, they're not able to take care of it, and then the baby is just going into the foster care churn because nobody's there to adopt the baby is just not true.
I would
All right,
like to
Sydney?
highlight what I mentioned earlier, that the rate of adoption is decreasing by a significant amount. 23% is not a small amount. That's a lot. And also, I would just like to highlight that I never said I was pro gender selection. That's never even come up. I never said that I was pro eugenics. I actually said I was anti eugenics, as we all should be. But unfortunately, if saying that people deserve the option to decide what medically necessary treatment they deserve to have, even if it falls under the category of abortion, if that makes me pro eugenics, then I don't know how to argue that. But I would like to just highlight the idea that people aren't available to take these children. It's actually getting economically very children, and that's why the rate of people adopting children is plummeting. Again, 23% is not low, but that's all I have to say about that.
All right. Thank you. And this question is for you, Tim. This one actually has a name to the question. The question's for. All right, Tim, do you have any suggestions for helping the mental and physical well-being of a teenage girl forced to give birth against her will in a world where abortion is not legal?
Ooh, that's a good question. First thing I would say is that abortion is still legal in all 50 states. It just changed, like in the state of Tennessee, it's legal for an abortionist to do it, but mothers can still take the pills at home to kill their infants or babies, fetuses, whatever term that you want to use for the human offspring. So number one, it's not illegal. It's not abolished anywhere in the United States. Secondly, I'm not a healthcare professional. I mentioned two resources that I would obviously refer to anyone that's going through difficult pregnancy: the Pregnancy Care Center as well as Alliance Family Services. They're doing awesome work to surround mothers regardless of their age, to help them get the support they need, the supplies they need, the community support in order to have their baby in tragic, horrific situations. And I will mention that I think that this is a question or argument, but arguments that are formed around like younger girls, the most tragic situations are the most effective pro-choice, pro-abortion arguments, because we all feel the emotions and tragedy around somebody that's going through that. But what we wouldn't say is that we wouldn't create a second victim. That innocent, after a conception happens in the circumstances of rape, which is obviously a tragedy, we don't extend the death penalty to the innocent child as well. We call for it for the father, absolutely. I advocate for the death penalty for the father, which doesn't sound like Sydney does. But I want that father to receive the death penalty for what he's done, because what he's done is so grievous. And I want the community to come around and love both mother and the child.
I would just like to point out that as of January 8th, 2025, 12 states have fully banned abortion. Alabama, Arkansas, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia have banned abortion in totality. And I'm looking at it right here. Guttmacher Institute. I'm looking at Center for Reproductive Rights, Britannica, State Court Report. I'm not making this up. I actually left the state of Tennessee because women's rights were not looking great in 2024. That's why I live in a purple state now. But so that's just simply factually incorrect to say that nobody is banning abortions, because lots of people are banning abortions. And I am hyper aware of this because I am somebody that impacts directly or could potentially impact directly. And then I do agree that instead of banning abortion, there are opportunities to help mitigate the abortions that happen, none of which include making abortion illegal. For example, we've seen the statistics of sex education in schools, promoting sex education and actually educating children on safe sex, protected sex, things like that, bodily autonomy, consent. We see the numbers in abortions decrease as children learn more about their bodies and about the reproductive system. So there are plenty of things that you can do that I advocate for. I'm a huge proponent of teaching kids how their bodies work, and abstinent-only education statistically doesn't work. We need to teach them what's going on with their bodies. I'm all for that. I am all for teaching them exactly what happens to the human body as women, as men, as you grow, how babies are formed, how to use a condom, giving condoms out at school. Because again, the studies show telling kids not to have sex does not stop them from having sex. Telling people not to get an abortion abortion does not stop them from having an abortion. Educating the pregnant in the first place is so important. And I would stand behind that 100%. So if we're going to make abortion illegal, but we're going to heighten the amount of education we give in public schools in terms of how to avoid getting pregnant to begin with, that's not killing a life. That's not killing a child, regardless of when you think life begins. That's something we can talk about. So I'm not standing here saying abortion is perfect for everybody. Absolutely not. But I do think that it is a life-saving measure. And I would rather have it be an option for people that are already existing, people like me, people like my friends, people like my neighbors, people I don't even know, to have an opportunity to get the care they need, even if it means in some instance somewhere somebody got rid of a baby because they just didn't feel like raising it. Death penalty is bad because one person dying innocently is too many. Abortions being illegal is bad because one person dying is too many. One innocent person who statistically already has a child, so they clearly are not anti-baby, with the hope that maybe they'll just put it in the foster care system and hope that somebody else is able to take that baby home, even though the studies are showing us now fewer and fewer people are adopting out of the foster care system. So it's confusing to me why we wouldn't want to allow abortion to be legal so that none of these things have to take place. There is no death because there was no life, because the abortion happened before there was any evidence of life whatsoever.
All right. Tim, 30 seconds.
All right, this is a great point of confusion that even a lot of pro-life people don't understand, and I'm excited for the opportunity to clear it up. But Tennessee did have a trigger law that went into effect when Roe was overturned. It's Tennessee Code 39-15-213, makes performing an abortion, like Sydney was talking about, a Class C felony for the abortionist. The law exempts mothers who perform their own abortions from any criminal liability. Quote, the section does not subject the pregnant woman upon whom an abortion is performed or attempted to criminal conviction or penalty. In the state of Tennessee, women can still order the abortion pill online and take it at home, which is happening now since it's like illegal to go to a grandparent home and do it. It's happening now in the state of Tennessee, and we can't really be aware of how many that is happening or how often it's happening. But abortions are still legal for mothers to do in the state of Tennessee. It's just illegal for the abortionist to do it.
So there are states that have criminalized.
Sorry. All right, that's 30. That's 30 seconds. So we're gonna go on to the next question here, and we'll let you have this one, Sydney here. The WHO, or I think this it's abbreviation. I'm not sure what the abbreviation is for. What is it?
Oh, I was reading his name. Sorry. No, go ahead.
It says the WHO. I'm not sure what abbreviation or acronyms that are for, but says there's approximately 73 million abortions per year worldwide. Is there an estimate of the annual number of sex-selected abortions per year, mainly affecting females?
I don't know the numbers on that because sex selection was never part of my argument. I never argued that people would abort kids based on what their gender is. I know that there's countries where male babies are favored more than female babies, especially in countries where they limit the number of kids you can have. Like when China had, I think it was their one-child policy, I know there was an uptick. There was a rise in female infants being aborted or abandoned because they didn't want that to be their one child. But I didn't do research on that because sex selection was never part of my case to make.
All right, Tim.
But in response, like sex selection is a legitimate case that you would say they're free to make that choice. Like maybe you're not a eugenicist, you're just not. And
I don't know. I've never heard of that being a thing. Like being allowed to say I'm aborting my kid because it's a boy. Like I've never heard anyone say that.
Because you don't have to say it, right? But you can. And we talked about Iceland and their record low rates of Down syndrome, and it's pretty well documented the reason they've been able to do that is because of selective abortion procedures tied to prenatal testing. So I know that you're not saying that parents should do that, but what you're saying is parents should be able to do that. And if that's the decision that they want to make, then like they should be able to make that decision.
I mean, if somebody wants an abortion and they need an abortion for whatever reason, if for whatever reason they can't be a parent, I have no idea what the reasoning is behind there. But I do know that if you make it illegal, people will die regardless of the gender of the child they're carrying.
All right. Thank you. And this question is for both of you. And this will be the final question as far as I can see. I don't think there's any more questions inside of the live chat here. This will be the final question. What effects, if any, has the availability of on demand abortion had on relationships between men and women? Have they gotten better or worse due to this practice? So I think the last question was first Sydney. So, Tim, you could take this one first.
This is an interesting question. I'm thinking through it, Marlon. Has the availability of on demand abortion have been harder on relationships between men and women? Yeah, I would say there's certainly circumstances where both father and mother have not agreed on whether to care for the baby or whether to kill the baby. There are tragic instances that, and you can see these online. Scott Hord, it's got an amazing ministry to the unborn. There's a guy named Juan, and his name is escaping me now, doing awesome work outside of the Planned Parenthood in Chicago. There are many instances where fathers are pleading with their mothers not to kill the baby, to care for it, and these guys are doing great work to throw support behind these fathers or mothers that do want to care for their baby. So yeah, I imagine that it has caused some very heartbreaking situations between fathers and mothers, and yeah, there's definitely no way around that for sure.
All right, Sydney.
So in the United States, one of the leading causes of death of a pregnant woman is homicide. I'm not making this up. This is a real statistic. Studies have shown that one of the two most dangerous times for a woman to exist is when she's pregnant and when she's trying to leave an abusive relationship. And those rates double when she's pregnant and trying to leave an abusive relationship. So whether or not abortion being legal has like changed the statistics of, or like the relationship between men and women, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that since becoming states that I mentioned, murder has gone up, domestic violence has gone up. We also saw this happen during lockdown. So women are violently murdered by romantic partners on a regular basis, and the studies show that this is most likely to happen when they are pregnant. So if you are with a partner that you are trying to leave and he is very abusive and he cannot find out that you are pregnant, to me that's a good enough reason to receive an abortion, because if that gentleman statistically finds out that you're pregnant, you could be killed. So while I don't have the exact numbers on what relationships between men and women are like, I'm not on the dating apps, I'm not out there polling people in terms of how their relationships with each other are. I do know that murder, 100% murder rises in states where abortion is no longer legal to obtain, or in states that make it mandatory for whatever reason to get permission, which is very, very rare, but it happens. So I would say that making abortion illegal negatively impacts the relationships between men and women in both a literal and statistical way.
All right, Tim, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I agree. Domestic violence, murder should be illegal and banned, and partners who do fathers who kill the mothers of their children, again, should receive the harshest penalty to the law. But I think what Sydney's actually saying is, they're demonstrating, is that abortion actually plays to the benefit of the abusive father, because he's angry. There's videos of folks going undercover into Planned Parenthood describing situations where pimps are wanting to, they've got somebody that works for them, a sex worker, a prostitute, and is pregnant, and then the pimp needs them to get rid of the child and is pressuring to do that, and Planned Parenthood goes right along with it. Abortion plays into the hands of abusers, for sure.
All right. And here is a super chat. Thank you for the support. Appreciate it. This question is for Sydney. Why are we worthless? And hence our lives can be thrown away at the whim of the mother prior to being born.
I'm not sure. Do they mean, I'm going to go based on, they mean zygotes, unborn children, fetuses. I'm assuming. Correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. So here's how I look at this. For lack of a better example, let's use me for an example. If I get pregnant and it is an ectopic pregnancy, and there is no chance that this pregnancy will be viable for life, but there is a chance that this will hemorrhage and will cause me to die or even to suffer tremendous blood loss, even if I survive, that my husband would make the call, say, for example, that I am unable to make this decision myself. Maybe I'm in a coma, to terminate that pregnancy via abortion, because that's what it is, to have that abortion to allow me to live and potentially try again, because we've seen it. The numbers show us that the 61% of women seeking abortions already have children. When that is no longer even an option, it's not even about saving the child. It's not even about the worth of the child. That embryo will never become a developed child, right? Similar thing goes with severe birth defects that we know will not allow the child to survive for more than a very brief period of time outside of the womb. We talked about hydrocephaly. I would hope that in the event that I cannot make the judgment call myself to abort the child with hydrocephaly, and either give birth to that child and have severe birth defects of the child, and the child will die. We know this to be true. The child will die. The only thing that changes is the amount of time they think it'll suffer before it dies. Sometimes it's days, hours, weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years. I would hope that he would make the decision to allow me to live, to not hemorrhage, to not suffer any of the already pre-existing trauma that comes with childbirth. Even healthy childbirth can be severely traumatic for the female body. I would hope that he would make the decision that we can always try again in the future, and that this just wasn't the time. At no point in that decision is the worthlessness of the child brought up. In fact, I know people who have lost children that were ectopic pregnancies that to date, I was listening to John Deloney just an hour ago, to date, women call him and talk about the names they gave their ectopic pregnancies that they missed, that they loved, that they cared about, but that they had to have surgically removed for their own safety. And there was no chance of viability. Happened in a state where that is illegal, that puts the mother's life at risk. The mother who loves the child, wants the child, never dreamed that this would happen to her. So it's not worthlessness. And I stated this earlier in the debate. I never said that their value as a human is less when they become viable humans outside of the womb, when they are viable births outside the womb. I'm talking about a choice here, and the choice to either have the abortion and maybe try again in the future, or say, you know what, I'm going to continue to raise this child, or I'm going to continue to give birth to this child who has hydrocephaly, and just see what happens. And maybe I'll be given a few years with this child, and I love this child no matter what. It's the choice we're talking about that's important, that goes away when you make abortion illegal. Neither one of those people, in my opinion, made the wrong decision. If you want to keep your child, keep your child. If you don't want to keep that child, don't keep that child. It's not about eugenics.
All right. Tim?
I would agree that in a state that makes the removal of ectopic pregnancies illegal is very dangerous for women. The problem is that that state doesn't exist. It is legal in Tennessee and in any state to remove an ectopic pregnancy. There is no viable way to preserve the life of the mother and the life of the child in those circumstances. And all pro-life, pro-abortion legislation backs that up. And anything that says contrary is just propaganda on the pro-abortion side of the house. But yeah, when we say some class of human being from conception onward is either, you remember the drunk driving question we talked about during the cross-examination, where we agree that like the charges were just that the drunk driver received, but that if the mother the next day then changed her mind and wanted to kill the child, that would be an equally just thing, is to say that human being only has value if it's wanted. If it's not wanted, it doesn't have any value under the law at all. And so that's my call, is to say that all human beings, whether they're wanted or not, deserve equal protection under the law.
All right, Cindy, you got 30 seconds.
I've covered it. I think I've said everything I need to say.
Okay. And here's another super chat. Thank you so much again for the support. That's for both. Since the last person for Sydney, this will be for you, Tim, first. Should fathers have the right to determine whether or not they should support the mother and child? Why or why not?
This is an interesting question, and I'm glad it was asked. I would support things like, first of all, I think fathers should be involved in the entire time. But I would advocate legislation that says fathers owe child support from the moment of conception. That child support and things like, and the expectation of the father's care isn't something that should come later. It's a human life from the beginning. It takes two to tango, and that the father should have legal responsibilities for that child once that human being exists. And so that's, I think that's consistent with my position to say at the moment of conception.
All right, Sydney.
So I think this is another instance in which nuance is very, very important. So do I think that fathers should have the right to determine whether or not they should support the mother and child? Why or why not? First of all, there is such a thing as signing away your parental rights. You can do that in the United States. I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what paperwork you need to fill out in order to do that, but I know for a fact you can do that. And I've met people who have done this before. You can sign away your rights. Even if the child isn't put up for adoption, mothers and fathers can legally sign away their rights. Where the nuance gets important is in cases such as teachers getting students pregnant, stepdads getting daughters pregnant, older brothers getting younger sisters pregnant, where we lose our nuance, especially in cases of rape as well, adult on adult rape, stranger violence, is in a country where that man is then also expected to pay for the care of the child. Now you have to wonder, do they also get visitation? Because in the United States, if you pay child support, you have the right to fight for visitation. So do we, and this actually happened here in the United States. A female teacher raped a young man that was her student. She gave birth to his child. Not only did she demand child support, but then she demanded that even though he had full custody of the child when she was released from prison, she took him to court for visitation. So now you've got a male child, right? A male child who is basically in a position where, because of finances, he now has to have a relationship potentially with his abuser. So in instances where it was consensual, whether they were married or not, it was a consensual thing. Girl gets pregnant, guy says, I don't want anything to do with it. You can legally do that now. Now, you can also go to court for child support and say, I actually contest this. Again, don't know the legal processes, but you can sign away your legal rights to the child. At the same time, if you make that a law, now you're opening the door for all of this troublesome narrative where the abusers now, where does it end? I've been paying for him for 18 years, so why don't I get a relationship with him? Why doesn't he get to visit me during the summer? Why doesn't this child, So middle of the road.
That is a timer for the expiration of the Q&A. But this is, I'll give you 30 seconds, Tim. And there was another super chat that was a follow-up for Sydney. So I don't know if you're open to answering that super chat.
Yeah, we did that. I don't have much more to say. There's tragic situations that need to be assessed individually. I certainly wouldn't want abusers to have legal rights related to their victims and things like that. But generally, I am an advocate for saying men need to take more responsibility, and that responsibility should start earlier on than just the birth of the child.
All right. And so we can let this be our last question of the evening here. Sydney, would you be okay with making abortion illegal for those who would abort for reasons of inconvenience?
No, because I also wouldn't make a man explain to me why he's getting a vasectomy. I wouldn't make anybody explain to me why their medical procedures deserve to be legal. So if somebody's getting an abortion, it's none of my business. It's not my business to know if people are circumcised. It's not my business to know if they had a good enough reason, in my opinion, to get a vasectomy. I am not the person to judge the reasoning. All I know is that the harms statistically are there for when we make abortion illegal. People die. Pre-existing human beings who live among us, our neighbors, our sisters, our teachers, our friends, they die when you make abortion illegal. Elective, for lack of a better term, we talked about elective abortions, do not stop when we make it illegal. That's my whole point here, is that if abortion is truly something that you care about and disgusts you, which I don't blame you at all for thinking that somebody out of convenience terminating a pregnancy is just, if that's what you want to stop, making abortion illegal is not the way to do it. You know, we talked about sex education. We talked about all sorts of people can use in order to avoid getting pregnant and therefore avoid getting an abortion. But if I were to make laws, I don't even know how to adequately make a law that makes somebody prove something well enough, because there will always be the outlier who was telling the truth and didn't get what they needed, right? I talked about the death penalty, even one being too many. Even one person telling the truth about why they need their abortion and it's dire and getting denied is too many. Then that opens the door for, what else do I have to prove about my health in order to seek care, right? I have kidney failure. I don't know how to prove to people that I need the medication I need for kidney failure. I don't know how to prove that, right? And so if we are going to say you're only allowed to have an abortion if we find the reasoning good enough, first of all, who's we? Second of all, how can they even determine that a reason is good enough? Then what is the repercussion there? If you seek an abortion and you get denied, then what? Do you have to raise this child? Do you have to put the child in the foster care system? There, it leads to so many muddy instances of breaking HIPAA violations that I think it could only lead to negative outcomes.
All right, Tim.
No, I kind of hit this similarly before. I think Sydney is very consistent in this position, and I do respect that.
Thank you.
That most people that are pro-choice, or I say pro-abortion, it's for whatever reason you want. It doesn't matter. It could be for economic reasons. It could be you just wanted a boy and you're having a girl. As much as Sydney may not like that, she supports that decision. She's supporting that decision tonight during the debate. But calling us back to the foundational principle is that every human being, no matter how small, no matter what stage of development, no matter where their location is, deserves equal protection under the law. And I'll leave it with that, Marlon.
All right. 30 seconds, Sydney.
I'm good.
You're good? You're good? All
Yep.
right. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, guys. Thank you for that. That was a great debate. Great job, guys. Good Q&A. And I'm going to let you guys go. Appreciate you guys for choosing the Gospel Truth to have this debate on. Definitely appreciate allowing me to host you guys. You guys were definitely great, and the decorum was outstanding. So you both have respect for each other, and I appreciate that. You make my job a lot easier. Believe me, I've had some chaotic debates. Tim can attest to that, because Tim watches, man, and I've had some rough ones where I'm just scratching my head, man, and stepping in a lot more than I desire.
I hope we made it easy for you tonight, Marlon.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you for that. And so, all that said, I do want to give you guys an opportunity just to give, say your goodbyes and citations, and perhaps remind everyone in the live chat where they can interact with your content, and so start with Sydney. Want to give them a closing saying goodbye and all that good stuff.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for hosting us. I really appreciate you moderating this. I'm glad you didn't have to moderate too much. That's a good sign. And then Tim, mad respect. We know each other in real life. We're friends. Very eloquent speaker. I had somebody text me about what a great job you were doing as a speaker during this. So I think your professionalism is just unending, and I appreciate you inviting me to join you on this. And if anybody's interested in hearing more thoughts or opinions, I somehow I feel like when I read the chat, they won't be interested in hearing more of my thoughts and opinions. You can find me on YouTube at Sydney Davis Jr. I also have a podcast called Growing Up Fundy, but I also do a lot of debate content on my TikTok, on YouTube, Jr., which is my screen name. And this has been a blast. So thank you so much for hosting me.
And I appreciate, Sydney, your decorum. And, if we were on stage together like we have been before, we would definitely be shaking hands at this point. I really enjoyed it. You're a respectful opponent, and I think we were able to have a good, effective dialogue tonight. So TennesseeApologetics.org. You can find me there. We have we did a conference this past fall called War of the Worldviews. We've got another one coming up that we're working on, put together for September, October this year, with some different speakers and things like that. You can go to the website. You can find me on YouTube too, under my name, Tant. I'm there. And sign up on the website to our mailing list for notifications about our apologetic fellowship nights and other things like that.
All right, cool. Once again, thank you guys for jumping on the Gospel Truth and having this debate on the Gospel Truth. And so I'm going to let you both go, and I want you guys to have a great evening. Enjoy your evening. And it's about 9:14 in Texas. So whoever you're in Tennessee, Tim. Where are you at, Sydney? You over?
I'm in
what state?
Arizona, so it's
Oh, so
8:15.
yeah, it's early
Yeah.
for you guys. It's early.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys go ahead and enjoy the rest of your evening, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. See you later.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
have a
See
good
ya.
one. All right. All right, folks, another great debate in the books, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you really enjoyed it, and this was an interesting, fascinating debate. A lot of statistics that I wasn't aware of, and I'm glad that I became aware of them, because as you guys know, one of the primary things that I love to allow people to do is to learn. Obviously, we approach debates and conversations with the disagreement already displayed, right? Already coming into the debate, your disagreement is there. So it's quite important for us, even in our disagreements, that we're not so much at a disagreement to where we can't learn from each other and understand each other's positions. And one of the things about the Gospel Truth is that I believe that this platform, this ministry, allows two people who disagree to come together and have a kosher conversation, where the decorum is delightful, and they can have a conversation to where they are learning from each other, so we can have proper representation whenever we're engaging each other's positions. And so that's extremely important. And that's why one of the reasons why the Gospel Truth exists is to allow for those conversations to take place. And so, with all that said, I appreciate everyone that joined the Gospel Truth today and joined this stream today and jumped in the live chat and debating and so forth and so forth. I appreciate you guys' respectful demeanor in the live chat. That's always welcome. And I give a special thank you to everyone who supported the channel monetarily, because as you know, the Gospel's Truth is presently preparing for a conference, the TGT Conference 2026, and that's going to be in Dallas, Texas. It's going to be February 6th through the 7th, and I have a strong, very, very strong I guess itinerary or debates that are planned for the conference. Individuals like Dr. James White versus Dr. Dustin Smith. They'll be debating the Trinity. Is the Trinity biblical? I have Eli Ayala is going to be debating prominent atheist Dan Barker. They're going to be debating does the God of the Bible exist? Dr. Leighton Flowers versus Jeremiah Nortier of the Apologetic Dog. He's going to be debating, and they're debating conditional or unconditional election. And so it's a wide-ranging conference that's going to have a whole bunch of topics, right, that people are open to enjoying. And the only way you can enjoy it is live, right, in person. If you've never been to a live in-person debate, the quality, the interaction, the environment, the engagement is way different from being in an online setting, right? An online setting has its elements of enjoyment, but man, if you want to see something magnificent, do it in person. Man, I have moderated one debate in person, and I tell you, the level of interaction and excitement that comes with seeing in-person debates is like no other. I'm telling you, it's like no other. So I do encourage everyone to ensure that they're going over to the Gospel Conference event page and buying your tickets. Right now, they are $70, and I do plan on doing a Black Friday sale for the conference in order to promote it more. Hopefully, you guys will buy tickets. So if you're sort of thinking about like, I don't know, maybe do it. Do it. I would love the chance to meet you, and you'll get a chance to meet your favorite apologist as well. And so all that said, I am done for tonight. And once again, I thank Tim and I thank Sydney for joining me tonight. And I thank you as well in the live chat for joining me as well. So with that said, I am out of here. And make sure you hit the subscribe and that notification bell on the way out. And so I'll talk to you next time, all right? May God bless you.